Nick, what's up, brother? Glad to have you on the podcast, man.
Ryan, thank you. I appreciate it.
I think we got, I'd been following you for a little bit, and then I think we got synced up. I was down there because you're in Austin, right?
Right outside of, yeah.
Yeah. I was down there with our literary agent, and then I met up with Cam, and then I think you and I got synced up a day or two, like right after I had left. Otherwise, it would have been cool to record a podcast face to face. I like doing that better, but we'll make this work.
Next time you're in Austin, let me know. I have the spots for dinner. I have the spots for some drinks. We got the podcast studio. We got a gym. Like we can hit it all in one session.
Right on, man. I also want to train with you too, because that to me is where the real value would come from. Because I'd be able to see what that training schedule is like. I'm not sure I'd be able to keep up, but I'd like to do it nonetheless.
Honestly, that's one of my favorite ways to meet someone and get to know someone because you're both humbled by something difficult and challenging. You have something to bond over, and it kind of just breaks down sometimes the awkwardness of like a new interaction, and
Absolutely.
you leave that experience as such closer people and acquaintances and friends.
Yeah. I actually think more men ought to do stuff like that because in modern times, men are told that in order to build friendships or bonds, they need to do it like women, and they don't resonate with it, which is basically sitting across from each other talking about who knows what, as opposed to men, we best bond over a common objective or a common enemy. So if it's in the gym, that's a common objective. We're pushing hard against something, we're challenging each other, we're pushing each other. But yeah, generally society would say, don't do that. Just sit around and talk about your feelings. And that just hasn't worked for me, let alone any other guy out there, I'm sure.
Well, I think that's why I've seen parallels and similarities between my time in the military and then building my company because both things are very physically and mentally challenging, and you bond together through this difficult objective. And I've seen such similar crossover between the two experiences.
Yeah. I know your story a bit about joining the military and then going through Ranger School. I was really curious about your transition out of the military. I think if I understand correctly, you started your nutrition company while you were still in the services, and then you transitioned after you came back from South Korea, I believe.
So I started my company in 2012 while I was still in college. So
Okay.
I went to school. I went to school out in Western Pennsylvania at this school called Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP. No affiliation with Indiana University. It's just in a town called Indiana.
Okay.
And I studied nutrition there. I was on an Army ROTC scholarship there. And between my junior and senior year of college, I decided to start my business, which was probably the worst time I could have started a business because a year later, I graduated with a degree. I commissioned in the Army as an infantry officer. I got sent to Fort Benning, Georgia for a year. I was in, Fort Benning for a year through the infantry officer basic course, Ranger School, Airborne School. And then I got stationed in Texas in 2014 at Fort Hood. Served 4 years in the Army, most of that time as an infantry platoon leader. Transitioned out in 2017, and that was like the first opportunity for me to go all in on the business. But I
Mm-hmm.
spent those 5 years leading up to that moment building the brand as much as I could in my free time, which was outside of my time in the military. So I did set myself up for success pretty well through my transition. I can't say that a lot of people do that. I've seen a lot of people struggle with the transition of military to civilian. Um, but I am grateful and fortunate that I did set that transition up pretty successfully.
Where did I get South Korea from? Am I way off? Am I thinking about something else?
Now, so I was in South Korea in 2016 with the military for 9 months,
Got it.
and so I got to Fort Hood, Texas. I was stationed there. I was leading an infantry platoon there. We got orders to go to South Korea for 9 months. I spent 9 months there training at Camp Casey, and I built the business a lot when I was in South Korea because what I realized is when I got there, I thought I thought my business was going to die because I thought I was going to have zero free time to do anything. What I quickly realized was we were doing the same job in South Korea that we were doing back in the States. However, now I didn't have a 35-minute drive to and from work every day. I had a 20-second walk from my barracks to my office. So what I told myself when I got to South Korea was I wasn't going to watch any TV shows, no movies. I wasn't going to hang out with anyone. Every waking moment outside of my job as a platoon leader, I was going to spend building the business. I was going to read books. I was going to listen to podcasts. I was just going to learn as much as possible. I rebranded our website. I relaunched new products, and we scaled the brand. I scaled the brand when I was in South Korea. So when I got there in February of 2016, we were doing $2,000 a month in revenue. My
Mm-hmm.
goal was by the time we left, or by the time I left South Korea, I wanted to be doing $10,000 a month in revenue. We hit that in the first 90 days of being there.
Really?
Yeah, so that was just building the brand on social media and gaining brand awareness and just documenting my life while I was over there and sharing the story. And it started picking up traction, and that was there was a positive correlation behind building these platforms and the brand and in sales and revenue.
Yeah. We have a similar story in that I made a similar decision when I was in Iraq in 2005. I made the same decision. I'm not going to do the TV shows. I'm not going to do all this and that the guys are doing. I spent some time in the gym. Of course, I hung out a little bit with the guys, but a lot of my time was spent studying for my life insurance and investment qualifications so that when I came back, I could jump right into a financial planning practice that I was planning on starting. And it was amazing how few guys were actually doing that. Most guys in their time off were sleeping or binge watching. 24 was the show at the time. And I was amazed at how few of us were taking that time and maximizing every moment. Did you find the same thing when you were in South Korea? Were guys dinking off, doing their thing, or were there a group of you guys who were, dedicated to something more above and beyond what you were doing there?
No, I was definitely the rare one in the bunch,
I bet. Yeah.
but a lot of the soldiers and non-commissioned officers in my platoon, they were talking about their future transition out of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And I challenged them with, hey guys, like you need to have a plan. You're either going to go to school, or you're going to find a job, or you're going to start a business. But the time to start that business is not the day after you get out of the Army.
Right. Right.
Because that's going to be a really tough transition. And I saw that happen to a lot of guys where all they wanted to do was leave the military, and they thought the grass was greener on the other side, and they left. And then the day after, they decided, oh, I'm going to start this business, and this business is going to blow up, and I'm going to be living this amazing life. And it took, I've been following some of these guys months and years to get it off the ground, if it ever did. So sometimes it's it's too late for a lot of people. You got to start earlier. And I was really encouraging these guys to, hey, let's build a plan so that when you do decide to transition out, you already have some momentum moving into it.
Right. Yeah. It's always interesting at how often we underestimate, I guess, how long it will take to build a business. So many people might see your success or see the success of what we've had with the podcast and the movement and think, oh, well, that's easy. You just talk to cool people, or you make a couple of inspirational posts on Instagram, and all of a sudden you're off to the races. But yeah, it takes a lot of time. And that actually translates into something I've heard you talk a lot about, which makes sense to me, is this concept of forward thinking and backwards planning, where I think most people are forward thinking. They're always thinking about what's next, what do I want? Maybe not specifically, or they're not doing it right, but they are dreaming, right? But so few people seem to get to that second part of that, which is backwards thinking. I'd love to hear more about that philosophy for you.
So backwards planning, the military is huge in backwards planning.
Right.
And it's pretty self-explanatory, where you set a goal, you have an objective, you have a mission, and then you build a timeline based off of where you want to be, when, where, and where you're at right now. And you fill in that gap with things that you have to accomplish to get you to point B. To get from point A to point B, what do you have to do at what point and where to be successful?
Right.
And you learn this in the military. And if you directly apply it to your civilian life, it works out pretty well in almost anything you're going to do. And what I quickly realized was a lot of people were just unfamiliar to this pretty simple tactic. And, in a business, there's always a visionary in a business. We're implementing the system in our business right now. It's called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's based off of the book Traction. I don't know if you ever read Traction, but
I haven't.
amazing book. And we're implementing this business system right now called EOS. And within EOS, you have an accountability function and structure for your company. And at the top of that accountability or organizational structure, you have a visionary. That is someone who is thinking into the future, coming up with the crazy ideas, and just kind of painting a picture for where you see this company, this organization, and these people moving to be successful. You are painting a trajectory. So I think that's been one of my strengths in my life is I am a visionary. I'm always looking into 12, 24, 36, 48 months out. Where are we trying to be in the future for either my business, myself personally, my family? Where am I trying to get us to? And then what do I have to do from now until then to make sure that it successfully happens? So I'm always forward thinking and then backwards planning. What that visionary does, you can be a visionary for your family. You can be a visionary for yourself. You can be a visionary for your team, for your business. You are painting this picture of where you're heading. And then you build a plan of this is how we're going to get there. And what that does is it creates very clear steps and communication for the people around you of this is how we're getting there. And this is when we're going to do it. And this is where it's going to put us. So it provides a lot of clarity for not just yourself, but your team, your family.
Have you found as a person who is a visionary that you are good at the backwards planning where the forward thinking might be your strength? Do you feel you're as strong with the planning? I know myself personally, I'm more of a visionary personality. I can see things that other people can't. I can envision what that might look like, what I want it to be. I'm not really, I can plan. I'm not really as good at implementing the minutia, the day-to-day activities that need to be done in order to accomplish it. I'm kind of like, hey, just go for it and let's just see what works. That's my personality.
I think it depends on the scale. So I enjoy being a visionary. Like I enjoy painting this picture for people to see where we're heading. If I have to backwards plan for myself, say I'm doing a marathon prep or I'm trying to gain or lose weight, I can be very successful in that. And for like smaller teams, I can backwards plan for smaller teams pretty well. I think in my opinion, as the organization gets larger and there's more moving pieces, I like delegating that to someone else who's better at doing it than me. So like I like paint the picture and I love having a team now that can execute on that picture and step in to do the moving parts, the backwards planning for me.
So how have you then, let's say you've got your team now, and I think I heard on a recent podcast that you're bringing more people in the right places to be able to scale the business even greater. Have you found any sort of contention or even just disagreement between yourself as the visionary who wants to accomplish this big grand thing and your team who is in charge of the day-to-day activities? And they're like, whoa, hold on a second. Like, we still have to do these things. And you're like, no, that was 2 months ago. We're on to something bigger and better now. How do you manage that conflict if it arises and comes up?
That's like that's the growing pains that I've experienced as a business owner for the last couple of years.
I bet.
I think a lot of that comes down to ego and removing and eliminating ego. I think there's definitely a time and place to have ego. And if you're leading an organization, you're leading your family, you're leading something, you're leading a sports team, you have to have the ability to make a decision and be decisive in that decision making. But I think you also have to have the humility and eliminate that ego to see everyone else's perspective. You know, like I've done it before. I've failed at this many, many times where I have this vision of where we're going to go and like where I want this company to be in 12 to 24 months. But it's really easy to overlook everyone else's role in all the things that they have to do in order to move their ship with the bigger ship, you know, to keep rowing the ship in the same direction. And you can really easily crush people and overwork people and hurt people through that process. So that's something I'm constantly trying to navigate is, yes, I want to put these big projects into motion. I want to achieve these massive goals, but is it actually feasible for the team to keep up with and accomplish as well? Because if I win and the business wins, but it crushes everyone through the process, well, that's a failure in my opinion.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. It's not, I do the same thing. I think any high achiever has that problem to a degree. And I used to say or think, well, what's your problem? Just get on board and like catch up, or you're not. And then I would pin it back on worth of that person, you know, that they were crushed or deflated or whatever it might be. And I'm trying to be a little bit more mature. It sounds like you're working through some of the same things I am of, hey, look, it's not as effective long term to be 100% in, going as fast as you possibly can, but nobody's there to help or to build. It's just not a sustainable way of doing it, in my opinion, in my experience.
I mean, it's tough because, you know, we're talking from like a business perspective right now. You care so much about the health and the success of the organization that, you know, in my case, I started over 10 years ago. Like I now identify with this company. I've sunk so much time, energy, and money into it. And I care so much about the success of it. But I equally care about the people who have uprooted their life, that have moved their family across the country to come support the mission as well. So I think it's this balance. And I don't know if I'll ever solve it or find a solution, but as you're pushing one, sometimes you neglect the other. You know, it's like I'm pushing the business so hard, and then I'll realize, oh shit, like I crushed some people through this process. And then you're in your head, you're in your mind of, did I make a wrong decision? Am I a bad leader? Like, am I a bad business owner? Like, these are things I'm always, you know, navigating in my mind as I'm trying to push people and develop people and do something that is almost unbelievable in terms of what I thought was achievable 10 years ago.
How is that mentality, and specifically the way that you've run the business or even viewed your employees and coworkers through the lens of being a father? Because I know you've got a 5 or 6 month old little girl, and you know, that's got to change things as well, obviously.
A 5-month-old daughter, and I'll tell you what, man, like it completely changed my life. And I've been told 6 months ago, before Charlie Grace was born, I was told by many other dads, this child of yours is going to change your life. And like I thought I understood that. I really did, until it actually happened. And it has completely changed my perspective on what really matters in life. And I know that sounds probably pretty cliche, but like, you know, now with this being my new life 5 months later, I'm navigating changes. I am realizing that I can't be as selfish with my time anymore. And I'm also realizing I want to be super present with my family. I want to be present with my wife. I want to be present with like my daughter and our future kids. And it has definitely changed the way I operate the business. It has changed the way I look at team members and employees, especially employees and team members that have families, that have kids who are married. Because if I'm being honest with myself, and I've had this conversation with my wife, the last couple of years, my head has been, like, it's been down, and it's work, work, work.
Of course.
And I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs like can resonate with this. And you never come up and kind of look around to see possibly what damage you have done. When our daughter was born, that was like the first time in a while where my head came up and I was able to look around at I guess some of the damage that I've done, and it was okay. I should have been more present with my wife the past couple of years. That's something I'm actively working on right now, and I'm honestly now forward thinking and backwards planning in terms of the father that I want to be, the husband that I want to be in the future, and how that changes my role in the business. That's something I'm actively navigating as we speak.
Yeah. It's challenging too. I've got 4 kids, and my oldest is 14, so I've been in the game for 14 years now. What's a challenge for me is being vigilant about that. It's I'm not going to say it's easy, but I do think it's at least more on the top of your mind that, hey, I want to be available and present for my wife and my 6 month old. But then she's going to turn 1 and 2 and 3 and 5. And it's really easy for myself. I imagine you're very much the same way, for us to slip back into default mode, which is for me, business mode, and remaining vigilant about staying on top of that balance of wanting to be with the family, wanting to run the business, and trying to find the right amount of time and energy and effort to give to both.
Yeah, I always explain it to my wife as I'm like, hey, Steph, I'm about to go into a sprint again. And she's like, Nick, you're always in a sprint. Like, stop giving me this bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That's good
sometimes,
she can tell you that.
yeah, but sometimes in business, there's a sprint that's about to come up. It's like maybe there's a new objective for the next quarter, or your team is about to grow, or you're launching a new product. And like, hey, I'm about to go into this sprint and it's gonna be heavy. Um, but I think my wife has kind of just picked up on finally that it is sprint after sprint after sprint. But I'm trying to plan for the future of, what do I want my life to look like in terms of my business, my work, my goals, my family, all of that. And I'm really excited for what that looks like in the future. I don't know what it looks like right now, but I'm really excited for it.
So how do you anticipate managing those sprint periods and not letting them roll into the next sprint, from sprint to sprint to sprint, and actually coming up for air, or slowing down the pace or the tempo with business because you want to be more deliberate and intentional with the family? How do you anticipate dealing with that as it comes up? Because she's probably right. I mean,
Yeah.
our wives are often right about the way that we're showing up in less than favorable ways. They're typically right about that.
Well, I'm a doer
Of course.
by nature. So like if there's something that needs to get done, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to step in and do it. So building a business has actually been a great lesson for me in terms of delegating responsibility and empowering people to do that job. Because what I've realized in the past and where I failed is I have delegated responsibility to someone who I've hired and I've empowered them, but then I took away that power by going and doing it myself. Which, if I was working for a company, I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So something I had to really realize as growing this business is delegation is important, empowerment is important, but truly empower them to succeed, to fail, to learn, guide those people, develop them, but you got to allow for that empowerment. So something I'm actively doing right now to kind of prepare for my future with my family is we're hiring more people, and especially people who have the experience, who have done it before, that I can truly delegate responsibilities to and empower and know that they're going to run with it like they own it themselves. So that's been a huge part of some changes we've made to the business in the last year is hiring more people who bring experience that can take on some of the responsibilities that I previously had so that I can truly operate in the role that I want to operate in the business.
Yeah. No, that is important, is bringing in the right people and then trusting that they can do the work. That's been a challenge for me is, okay, I know I need to delegate. I know I need other people. And then you see them even do something that's not wrong necessarily, but different than you might do it. And then you step in immediately. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, hold on a second. Like you said, you gave them authority to do that. Like, you actually have to trust them to be able to do it, and then guide, of course, and instruct where where it's appropriate and where it needs to happen. But that is definitely a challenge, especially for something like you've built, which I imagine you feel like is your baby outside of your actual baby.
Well, it's like I was telling you, I identify with this company. I was thinking about this the other day as I was on a plane coming back from a work trip. Is this thought of, I founded BPN in 2012 and I put blood, sweat, and tears into this business. And after doing that for an extended period of time, you truly identify with it. And someone asked me the question a few months ago of, well, Nick, who are you without your company? And I was like, you know what? That's a great question, because I've truly identified with building this thing for a decade now that I've invested everything into it. So sometimes you so truly identify with what you've built that I don't want to say you lose a part of you, but I think it's just part of being an entrepreneur that you have to accept.
How are you answering that question, or what work are you actively doing to be able to answer the question of who you are outside of the business that you've created?
I haven't had an answer for it yet, but I do think that having our daughter 5 months ago is helping me identify with like who I really am. And if I think about who I want to be known for, like when I die one day, whether that's tomorrow or whether that's 40, 50 years from now, I don't want to be known as, oh, Nick Barry, he's like that beast guy who lifts weights and runs marathons. I don't want that on my tombstone. I love to train. Like, that is one of my true passions in life. I probably train more than I should, but I want to be known as a role model. I want to be known as a role model for fathers, for my children, for people who follow me on social media. I want to be known as the guy who chose the hard right over the easy wrong and who built a life that was respectable. So that's a long way of saying that is what I want to identify with. And the things that I do in my life now and then in the future moving forward, that's what I want to be known for. And it's choosing things to work on, whether projects or myself with my family, that align with those values.
I'm writing that down because I think that's a good frame, is answering the question, what do I want to be known for? Who do I want to be known for? That's a good, I'm constantly thinking about prompts or questions that I can ask myself and other people can ask that we haven't before, that might get us thinking about our lives a little different. Because I think that's what needs to happen. So many guys are listening to this podcast and they're thinking to themselves, I want a different result out of my life. I want a different marriage, or I want a different business, or I want to be in a different spot financially or from a physical perspective, but they don't know how to do it. And I've always been the mentality of like, well, if you want something, just change, just do it. It's like, that's really easy to say, but if you don't know what to do, that can seem like a very daunting task for people. And that's why I think looking at these from a different frame is so crucial. So I really like that question. It's a powerful question.
I also like thinking of like, what do you want to be known for and by who? So is it by all these people who really don't know you? That's what's hard with social media, right? Is like, I have people comment on some of my posts and they say, oh, Nick, you're such a good leader. Nick, you're such a good husband. Nick, you're such a good father. How do you know? You don't work in my company. You don't have a bed in my house. You're not around me, when I spend time with my wife and my daughter. You see what I show you, but you don't know if I'm a good husband or a good father.
Yeah.
It's like, what do I want to be known for by who? A lot of it's my family. It's the people that are really close to me in my life. Yes, I want to be a role model for these people online who follow me for content, but at the end of the day, who really matters? And it's the people I'm living in a house with.
Yeah, it's a good point, because you can actually begin to buy into it, even though you're deficient in certain areas. And I know I am, but other people will see and say, oh, you're so good at this, you're so good at that. And you're like, yeah, I am. And you try to convince yourself that you are pretty good at those things when in full reality that you have so many flaws and room for improvement that you might overlook if you begin to buy into that bull crap that you're, God's gift to whatever.
I was listening to this podcast a few months ago. It's probably over a year ago at this point. And I told this story before on my platforms, but I love this story. And in the podcast, it was this gentleman who was being interviewed who he just sold his business. And he sold his business for $100 million. And the person interviewing him said, sir, you just sold your business. You spent the last 2 decades building this thing. You sold it for $100 million. What are you going to do now? And he said, well, I'm going to travel the world with my family. And he looks over at his family and his family goes, Dad, we don't even know you. We don't want to travel the world with you. So I always think about that story where, from the outside, it's here's this happy family, the husband, he just built this business. He sold it for $100 million. They're going to go travel the world. They're going to live this dream life. And his family says, I don't even know you. I always think about that in terms of what do I want to be known for and by who?
So this has been a struggle for me personally. As we're talking about this, you've been successful financially, career-wise with your business. I've been successful with my business. And so I think it's easy for us to say, yeah, we don't know our families. And we actually have the luxury because of what we've done, and it's not to discount the work, but we do have the luxury of saying, yeah, I am going to go on vacation. Or I am going to take this week off, or I am going to take Thursday from noon to 4 off every week to be with my kids or to coach one of their teams. And we have that luxury because of the work that we've done. But man, there's times, and I do too, where like we don't have that luxury because we're trying to make the mortgage payment and it's paycheck to paycheck. What do you say to that guy who's like, yeah, I would love to be able to know my family, but I got to work. I got to put food on the table. And they truly are in that position.
It's a sprint. Sometimes you got to sprint with it. And, I think anyone who has achieved some sort of success or has luxuries to enjoy now, they also had to go through some mud that sucked for a long period of time. And I've had a few of these years. 2017 was honestly one of these years for me where this is the year I transitioned out of the Army. It's the first year we did 7 figures in revenue. And it was the hardest year of my entire life. It was 3 of us. It was me, it was my brother, and it was our friend Joe. He was our first employee. He still works in the business. He's director of operations now. And we moved down of all fulfillment in my house, and we signed a lease for our first warehouse. It was 6,000 square feet. We could not afford it by any means, but we signed a lease for a warehouse. And this entire year was the hardest year of my life because we were growing, and we were growing fast in terms of where we relatively started. And inventory demand was crazy. We had no loans. We had no line of credit. We were financing all of the inventory on our own. Cash flow was so tight. There were multiple months where our rent was due the next week, and our rent was, I think, $8,000 a month. We had $3,000 in the bank, and we had to pull together an additional $5,000 to make it to the next week and month. I think we all go through these periods, and you have to be self-aware to realize where you're at right now. And it might suck, and it might be really hard, and it might be really challenging, and it probably hurts pretty bad. But if you forward think and backwards plan and be really intentional and deliberate with it, you can build a strategy to get yourself out of that hole. And through that process, you might have some wins. You're probably going to have some failures and losses, and you're probably going to get your ass beat through it. But most people can dig out of that hole with a plan in place. But I think you have to be pretty realistic and aware of, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. It's not going to change overnight. And I got to take one day at a time and just follow the plan.
Yeah. So in 2017, so when you were going through that, were you married at the time?
I was single. I wasn't married. Wasn't dating my wife. So I could dedicate all my time to the business,
Right.
which, I realize most people don't have that option. People have kids, people have a family, and I can personally say I can't relate to that. Like I built the business during a time, 2017, when I was responsible for myself, and that's about it. I had, my brother and Joe, and I didn't have a family. I didn't have kids that I was trying to manage during that process. I can't personally relate to someone who's going through that, and I can only imagine how challenging and difficult it is.
But you can't, and I get that. And I actually appreciate you saying that, but you can relate to having a wife, having your child now and going through those sprints. So when there are moments of sprinting, and it sounds like she's called you out on it a little bit,
Yes.
what are your conversations with her? Because you get it, right? You're like, I got to do this for work. It's your vision. It's your dream. It's what you want to accomplish. It's all up here in your mind. You're bought into it clearly because it's your plan. But she may not be fully bought in. Now she's committed, right? Because she committed to you. But how do you get her buy-in on these sprints when she just wants to be with you?
I mean, I've done it poorly and I've done it successfully. I've done it poorly and I've failed more times than I've done it successfully. When I've done this successfully, I've been very upfront and honest with her, and the sooner the better of, hey Steph, like we're about to go into this big sprint. Like here's the days I'm gonna be gone. Here's the nights I'm probably gonna work late. Things are probably gonna change, but like here's the expectation. Um, and sometimes like for me right now, I'm in a sprint right now. We're prepping for 2023, and we're making some big changes to the business where we put the baby down, and then me and Steph spend some time together, and then she goes to sleep, and then that's when I go into the computer room and I work for a few hours while she's asleep. And like right now, I'm in one of those sprints where I'm sleeping very little to make sure that I'm making my wife happy and I still get my work done. So I'm always looking at like a 24-hour period of where can I allocate some hours to get certain things done, and what can I eliminate through that process to make sure I'm working on my priorities. I can pretty confidently say right now, I have zero hobbies. It's spending time with family, it's training, and it's work. And at some point in the future, I will incorporate some hobbies into my life again, hopefully. But like right now, I'm prioritizing what I have to get done. And there's only like three focuses. It's my fitness and my training, it's my family, it's my business. And nothing else right now is coming in the way of that because we're in one of these sprints. But I think that's where a lot of people struggle and fail is people want to add things onto their life. They want to add projects and goals and ambitions and all these new things, but they're not willing to eliminate or sacrifice other parts of their life that could be considered luxuries.
Hmm.
You can only add so much onto until you're overwhelmed. As you add something on, you typically have to take one thing away. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people actually do struggle with.
Is that why you wouldn't consider like training, running a marathon, that activity? Is that why you wouldn't consider that a hobby because it's a non-negotiable, or because you're a professional in this space? Like, why don't you consider that a hobby? Because when I think of hobby, I think something that's recreational, that I enjoy, and that's good for me. And I think training and physical fitness would fall into that category. So I'm curious why you wouldn't call it that.
Yeah, I think for me it's a little unique because that is content that we use for the business.
Mm.
So we use these training series as content to generate brand awareness and traffic and sales to the business. But also, selfishly, I show up as a better person. I show up as a better husband, father, leader, business owner if I move my body, if I'm working out, if I'm training. Um, and part of it is I just love it, right? Like I can pretty confidently say like I need that in my life to be a happy person. If I don't, I'm probably pretty shitty to be around.
I bring it up because I know so many men, and I've done it, where we're willing to give up things that are good for us, and it may not even be physically, maybe it's mentally, spiritually, emotionally. It's like, that's good. That's going to go on the back burner because we're busy and we're doing one of these sprints. And then it seems like more often than not, we never get back to our hobbies. It might be hobbies, it might be friends, it might be certain trips that we take. Like for me, hunting trips, the fall is usually a busy time for me. We were talking about Cam Hanes earlier, that he falls more in line with that. Like that's him, right? That's a non-negotiable than a hobby. For me, it's more of a hobby, but so many guys just don't go back to those things that enrich their lives in other ways outside of family and work. And I think we need it. We have to have it.
I agree. I mean, it's like, it's very unique to the individual, but it's what makes you you. It's what brings like life and passion into your life. And if we're not thriving and we're just kind of moving through the motions, you're going to kind of show up as just this bland, non-unique, just thing. That's just person.
Yeah.
Like you can tell when you have a conversation with someone, you meet someone, you have dinner with someone, and there's just like energy flowing through their body. Like they're passionate about what they're doing. They're happy. They're enjoying it. They want to share that with you. And then, you've had conversation with people where it's just, it is what it is. There's not that fire there. And I thrive off other people's just like fire and passion.
Have there been times in your life, or is this just a personality trait where you've always had something to fixate on that drives you, that you're passionate about? Or have there been times where you've been that other guy where it's kind of just blah, like just going through the motions, just trying to survive one day to the next, et cetera, et cetera?
I would say, honestly, ever since I graduated college, which was 2013, I have had something I've been actively working towards. Ever since I started my business, actually in 2012, like that moment really did change my life because I set this huge goal and objective, and I was very quickly humbled by it. Year one of our business, I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to make $1 million this first year. And he said, Nick, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. And there's a reason that those words are now painted in this office right next to me, is because that first year we did $20,000 in revenue. Year two, we did $20,000 in revenue. Year three, we did $20,000 in revenue. My dad said, Nick, if it was that easy, everyone would do it.
Yeah.
And I was very quickly humbled by that process. But I saw what the process was teaching me, and I saw what I was learning through it. And since that moment on, I've been setting goals and I've been working towards. And I've failed many, many times. And there's still goals that I'm working towards that I haven't accomplished, but I've had some wins along the way. I'm a very obsessive person. Like naturally, I'm an obsessive person where I set a goal and I'm going to do whatever I have to do to achieve it. I control all the variables. I obsess on the process. I obsess on every part of it. It drives my wife insane. But I've seen the result of when you obsess on something and you are very consistent and committed to the process, it gets you really close to achieving, or sometimes you actually achieve it. But if you don't give yourself a chance, you're never going to get there.
Yeah. What is your goal planning like? Because I've seen it just from the outside looking in. I've seen you have different fitness goals. Some are short term, it looks like, some are long term. What is some of your strategy for planning out your goals in business, fitness, family, that sort of thing?
A lot of it's, what do I actually want to do? What do we actually want to do? I think sometimes, and I've done this myself, people set goals that they personally don't want to accomplish, or they don't really care about.
Yeah.
They set goals because other people are going after it, or there's some clout behind it, or it seems cool. And I've set goals before. I'm like, I don't know why I'm setting this goal. I really don't want to do this. But when I set something, like I want to go after this, and it's because I actually want to do it, I'm passionate about it. Well, that's when I have the most fun with it. That's when I see the most reward through the process. So I think that's the first step, is like, what do I actually want to do? And then is it feasible based off this time in my life? How's this going to affect my family? How's it going to affect my business? How's this going to affect employees? And then it's kind of from there, can we all get behind this? Because I can decide what I want to do, but if I'm being realistic, it does affect a lot of people. If I choose a certain goal, it's going to possibly change the trajectory of our marketing strategy and our business plan, the people in this building, or it's going to affect my family, my wife, my daughter. So it's really being aware of who else affects the goals that you're putting in place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important to take that into consideration because they will be impacted by the things that you're doing. And so it's important to take it into consideration and then learn how to communicate effectively with those individuals as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure anyone in a relationship or anyone who's married has heard the communication segment, but I think the biggest thing I found with communication, yes, it makes things easier in terms of planning and just a relationship, but it reduces the feeling of resentment. And if I go into something and I lack communication with my wife, or I lack communication with people in the business, and I'm not clear in terms of what I expect or what's going to happen, and as soon as you start and you don't feel like you are supported, you don't feel like people understand, people aren't behind what you're doing, it's very easy to build resentment towards other people who you feel aren't supporting your goals. So that's what I found the biggest part of communication in terms of setting goals, forward thinking, backwards planning is, if it's done correctly, you won't build resentment towards too many people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an important factor. I found that in addition to resenting other people, you almost become calloused towards people that you actually care about. If you don't feel like, for example, you're getting the emotional support or whatever that you're looking for from other individuals, not only do you become resentful towards that person, then you start to cut yourself off from that person or put up a wall like, well, I don't care what you think. Doesn't actually matter. Doesn't impact me. And so we put up these coping mechanisms, and then you drive on in the face of somebody you care about who might not like what you're doing or might not be on the same page. And communication could have solved it, but you put up this big barrier, this big wall, and now you're blowing the whole thing up.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hardest parts, I think, of for me being an entrepreneur and being a business owner is, in the beginning, we've talked about being this visionary, and it's really easy to forget that it's in your head. Like, you see where you're going, you see what you're working on, and you see why you're working on it. And then when you start working on this project or towards this goal and no one else understands why you're doing it, it's really easy to forget that they don't see into your brain. Like,
Right.
no one knows like what you're thinking and where you're going. So when they don't follow you, they don't support it, they don't understand, it's not because they don't care, it's because you didn't properly communicate. And I mean, I'm sometimes horrible at this, where, clear example, I'm having a conversation with my wife at dinner, and I'm there physically, but I'm thinking about something in terms of work. Like my brain is always just like cooking.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes people will say, Nick, you're being really quiet. I'm not actively trying to be quiet. It's like there's something going on in my head. I'm trying to navigate some sort of issue right now, and it's so present in my head that I think it's verbally and audibly out loud, but it's not. So no one else sees it, and that's why I love running so much. Is like, I run in the morning because that's like my one time where I have some solitude in the morning by myself to navigate through issues, and they just come to my mind, and I kind of just find solutions for the problems I'm experiencing. So when I show up to the office, I show up for my family after that morning run, I'm more clear with what I'm trying to communicate because I just had an hour to digest and navigate the process.
Yeah. I was going to tell you what's interesting about with you running is I'm sure there's such a stereotype. Like you don't look like a quote unquote runner. You look like strength guy. You look like a bodybuilder, right? So it's
Yeah.
all, so I wanted to tell you that because my son, my oldest son, he always asks like, who's coming on the podcast? Who's coming on? And I said, oh, this guy, he's coming on next week. We scheduled something. And I showed him your Instagram account. He's like, whoa, he's big. And he's a runner because my son's a power lifter. That's all he wants to do.
Yeah.
So it is pretty cool to see you kind of changing that stereotype around what a runner looks like versus, what a bodybuilder or a power lifter might look like.
Well, I'm even heavier now so I ran a marathon this past May, and that was Buffalo, New York Marathon, and I ran 2:48 there, and I was 187 pounds. 187 pounds for me is extremely light. So I had to diet down, and
Okay.
a lot of the training facilitated that weight loss. And now I'm sitting about 225 pounds. And, it's middle of December. My body naturally wants to sit around 210, 215, 220, but I'm trying to pack on some size right now. But I love being a bigger runner because people do question it. They say,
Oh,
well,
for sure.
you can't be big and you can't run. Well, you can. So I'm going to really lean into that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So are you training for a marathon right now?
Not right now. No, right now, the plan is to pack on some size and strength until March 1st. And then I'm going to start a diet. And then I'm going to do a bodybuilding show in June. I haven't done a bodybuilding show since 2012. So it goes back to like setting goals. I was itching for something like new and refreshing. And I was going through like this nostalgic period of time in my life where I was looking back at when I was strictly strength training and putting on size, and I did my bodybuilding show in college, and I was listening to like the old music I used to listen to then. I started wearing Chucks again on my feet, and these nostalgic feelings just had me gravitating towards a bodybuilding show. So it was like, what do I want to do? Where will I thrive right now in this moment of time? This is how I want to train, and this is what I want to train for. So I'm going to document this process. And then I'm sure in the future, like I'll be itching for a marathon or another ultra or something like that. But I'm setting these goals based off of what I actively want to do right now. And right now it's nostalgic feels.
Yeah. So is building muscle, putting on weight part of the plan for bodybuilding? So you'll bulk up, you put on that weight, and then you'll diet down, lean out, so you're ready for that show body, right?
Yeah, it's a plan. I mean, during these last couple ultra, marathon, triathlon preps, I did lose some significant size. So I'm doing about like a 9-month build or bulk. And I mean, muscle memory is a real thing. I put back that size and strength fairly quickly. And the goal is to pack on some size. And that's why I'm putting on weight intentionally, so that when I diet down starting March 1st, I can kind of expose some of that size that I've packed on in the last 9 or so months.
Right. Got it. I am curious with the muscle memory as I see my two oldest boys get really, really into powerlifting. And that's something that I was never much into. I was always athletic. I was always into sports, but never powerlifting, team sports mostly for me. Do you know of research or something like that shows that their development of muscle during their like high testosterone years and going through puberty, that the body that becomes like the standard for the body? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't know of any research that supports that. I did have Dr. Lane Norton on our podcast a few months ago, and he did reference some research that showed that, muscle memory is a real thing. And in terms of if you put size and strength on and then you lose that over a period of time, it's easier to build that back up as opposed to if you didn't have it at all. I don't know if like in your early years, if, as your testosterone is higher naturally, if that impacts anything. I started really strength training when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. Like, that's when I got really, really serious about it. And I packed on a lot of size and strength then. And I lost it, many times. I lost it when I went to Ranger school. I lost it when I was in the military. I lost it through like these endurance preps and races. So like right now is the biggest that I've been since my military days.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. I'm just very curious about that because of how dedicated they are. It's actually really cool to see my two oldest boys so dedicated to it because I'm trying to think about when I was 14 and 12, which is their ages. Like, that's not what I was doing. I mean, they're leaps and bounds ahead of where I'm at, which is pretty cool to see.
It was impressive. I mean, it's impressive to build that type of routine and consistency and kind of goal setting early on.
Yeah,
And I'm sure a lot of that is, learned and replicated through you being a father. Um, but like that's only setting them up for success in the future.
definitely. I did want to ask about your this mentality of going one more. And I want to ask it in a different way that I don't know if you've been asked. I'd be curious. Is there a time when enough is enough and you shouldn't go one more? And if that's the case, when would you know that?
It's a good question. Like if we're being honest and like being smart, like if we put it into like go one more, the intent of going more was never to be just another rep in the gym or just another mile spent on a run or never just another hour spent on a project you're working on. It was much larger than that. And we established this phrase in 2018, and I discovered it during a training run for a marathon prep. Go one more is applied to everything you do in your life when you think that you just can't go any further. Like you want to give up, you want to stop. You always have more effort that you can put forward. Now, if we simplify it in terms of like physical training, if say for example you're doing an ultra marathon in the Rocky Mountains of Leadville, Colorado, and your body is on the brink of absolute collapse, it might be smarter for your health to DNF and go to the aid station and like, hey, this just like is not my year for safety reasons. But if we take like a broader perspective and approach to go on more, disregarding like safety for your health, I think there is a point where it can be too much. And I'll kind of like put this in an example of a scenario. Like say right now I'm in this sprint of business. Say like I had to get the business to another level in the next 3 months. And I have my wife and I have my daughter, and they're being neglected. I'm not present at home. I'm always gone, and I'm just driving the business, just like hard charging. And my wife says, "Hey Nick, like I can't do this on my own anymore. Like I need help. I'm home. I need help with a baby. I can't get anything done. You're always gone." If I were to say, you hold down the house, I got to keep going in this business.
Go one more, hun. Just go one
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Applying going more to that, it's
Yeah,
now you're neglecting like
for sure.
your priorities, your responsibilities. I do think that you can overdo it, but that's like one of those examples of who's being affected in the process of you trying to push yourself and apply going more to your life. If it's causing damage to people around you, especially your family, I think you have to highly consider if you should actually keep pushing on that objective.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like you're talking about taking all of your priorities into consideration. You know, it's a luxury to be able to focus on one priority and not have to worry about these ancillary things. They're not even ancillary. That's probably not the right word, but these other things that are equally, if not more important. I think we have to take that whole pie into equation rather than just one slice we may be hyper focused on.
Well, as I've gotten older, life is changed. It's different. I was talking about 2017 earlier, where I could make a decision and it might impact like one or two parts of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Do I get sleep tonight? And are we going to make more money in the business?
Right.
Now, as I've gotten older and I have a family, we have more employees, like I have more responsibilities. That same decision might affect 10 to 12 different parts of my life that I need to highly consider. And as you have more responsibilities and you have more roles and duties, these decisions carry more weight and they affect more things and people. And I think you really need to highly consider that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Well, Nick, this has been a great discussion, man. I got to tell you, I've been inspired by you for some time, so I'm glad we could finally have it. It sounds like we're going to get together face to face at some point, and at a minimum, get a training in, maybe even share the stage at some point together too. So, not the bodybuilding stage, by the way, but maybe the
Are
speaking
you sure?
stage. I'm
June.
sure. I'm sure. I'm sure about that.
All right.
Um,
All right.
I mean, we're talking about priorities here and choosing what's important. I'm sure about that. Now, if it's a jujitsu competition, that's something that I'm going to actively be working towards. So that'll be my route.
It's interesting.
Um,
I had Leif Babin on the podcast a few
oh
weeks
yeah,
ago,
yeah,
and he was talking about jujitsu, and that's something I've never personally gotten into. I would love to in the future, but I think I'd be truly humbled going into that for my first time because I know I will try to muscle everything through that
of
process,
course, of
and I'll
course.
just get absolutely crushed.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, where you're big and athletic and you're strong. If you take somebody, what'd you say you weigh 225 or so? You said roughly.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, you take somebody who's maybe 200 pounds, who's been training for 3, 4, 5 years. It 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 will equalize that strength very, very quickly. Now, you might have an advantage over somebody who's 160 pounds, and it's like there's no gap that's going to make up for that, right? But if you're talking about 20, 30, maybe even 40 pounds on a high level jujitsu guy, it's amazing how quickly they can level the playing field.
I'm curious.
Have you ever done any martial arts at all? Like, did you wrestle or anything like that? Or,
No, never.
yeah, you'd be a beast, man. You'd be a
It'd be brand,
handful for
it'd
sure.
be brand new for me for sure.
Yeah. Well, then maybe that's a good place to go. You know, start something you've never done before. Hey, man, I know you've got a new campaign coming up too. I wanted to give you a minute to talk about that, and then also let the guys know where to find you.
Yep. So we're launching a brand campaign on January 1st, and it's a sub campaign of Go One More, and it's called Prove Yourself Right. And the whole concept behind it is a lot of people will go after objectives or challenges or just try to do something in their life to prove others wrong. And I hate that concept because you're investing time, energy, and resources into what other people think in terms of doubting you instead of believing in yourself. So I'd love to like flip that script and instead of trying to prove other people wrong, prove yourself right. Because if you prove yourself right, you believe in your ability to do it. Now you just have to put in the work. So this brand campaign launching January 1st. It's called Go One More, Prove Yourself Right. Our call to action is to get people to commit to something challenging, something hard in 2023, something physically hard. And hard is relative. It could be, your first 5K. It could be your first half marathon. It could be your first 100-mile ultra marathon. It's what is hard for you. And like I said, hard is relative. But we want to encourage people to sign up and commit to something physically challenging in 2023 because we know they will grow significantly, physically and mentally through the process. And it's all about just proving yourself right, not trying to prove others wrong. So that's a brand campaign we're launching. People can find me on YouTube. It's Nick Bear. I've been documenting my life on YouTube for the last 9 years now. I think I have over 800 videos of just vlogs of literally where I started when I was in the military. I documented my 9 months in South Korea. I documented building the business. We have a podcast called the Bear Performance Podcast. And on Instagram, I am Nick Bear Fitness.
Right on, brother. We'll sync it all up so the guys know where to go. I appreciate you and looking forward to connecting very soon.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man.